Evening, everybody who is with us now online on Facebook and here in this lovely Zoom room. My name is Iulia and I'm a translator and journalist. Tonight, I'm hosting a very lovely hour in the company of Gayle Forman, one of the most beloved authors also in our country. And just in case you forgot, her latest book, published in Romanian, was We Are Inevitable. And you can see the cover back in my virtual background. You can see the Romanian cover, which I love. I simply adore. I think it's one of the best covers I've seen in the latest months. And I really, really like how it looks. So welcome, Gayle. We are very, very happy to have you here with us.
I'm so glad to be here.
Good. So before we start with just a couple of warm-up questions from myself, I will just state a couple of, let's call them guidelines, so not really rules. So if any of the lovely people here present with us would like to ask a question or to tell Gayle something directly, they are more than welcome to raise their hands, either by doing like this so that I can see them, or by using the Zoom option that says raise hand, or by writing their question or signaling in our chat that they would like to talk. So it's quite easy, raise hands or signal in the chat room. So as I said, I will leave you just for a couple of minutes, and I will start by asking Gayle, because I was like super curious to know about this. As I said, I'm also a journalist, and I know she's also a journalist. So I wanted to ask, what came first, journalism or writing?
No one has ever asked me that question before, Iulia, so thank you for that. And it's interesting because professionally, journalism came first, but writing, I've been doing my entire life, long before I ever considered a career in journalism, let alone fiction. It was just something I've always done. I've always made up stories. And then when I could write, I wrote them down in various forms, whether it was poems or plays or these long, endless novels that just kind of meandered, but I never connected to me that would be a job I could do, that would be the way that I could earn a living. So journalism professionally, but writing fiction, making up stories since I could remember.
Are you the kind of kid who won, I don't know, awards in school because of the lovely compositions, or were you that kind of kid?
Not even that, because I was a terrible student.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I mean, I never did my homework. So I was definitely, I remember certain writing things. I remember I wrote a play, and it was maybe in 8th grade, which is here, when you're 13. And the play was called Going to Crete Again for the Very First Time, which I thought was just such an exciting title. But I remember writing that play, and I don't remember much about it. I wish I could find it. It was about a girl who goes to Crete and is having all these deja vu moments and realizes that there's a secret in her family and she's been here before. And I remember writing that and feeling like this tingle of excitement, the way that you do when you're onto a story. But even then, I wasn't a diligent enough student to ever win awards. I didn't apply for any of those writing things. It was something I mostly did in my spare time to make sense of my world.
Yeah, I can see. But in the end, you, as you said, you started as a journalist professionally. So this means that you probably pursued some kind of studies in this respect. Am I right?
You are right. But even that I did backwards.
Oh, how come?
So when I finished high school here, I went traveling for 3 years. I said, I told my parents I wasn't going to college. I was going to the University of Life. And I traveled and I lived all around Europe. And I finally came back because I decided I wanted to be a doctor. And so I went to college, university, to study medicine. And that lasted about a year. And then I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. And so I just started taking these random classes. And I took a journalism class and I really liked it. And the journalism class that you had to take after that was a very, very difficult class that was meant to like get rid of all the people who weren't, hardworking enough and meant for it. I took that class because I was interested, but also because I had a crush on a boy who was taking it. So I took that class because of the boy, and I finished that class not interested in the boy, but fully into journalism. But even journalism was an accident. And then journalism, I was like, of course, this is what I want to do. I love to write. I love to travel, and I love to talk to people and ask them things that are none of my business. So it was the perfect job. As I'm sure you understand, right? As a journalist, you get to just go and ask strangers these things.
Yeah, you have a very good excuse about this. Yeah, it's true. I can relate. Definitely. Yeah, wow. Okay. It strikes me a bit like a little of a Gilmore Girls story.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, these were just a couple of questions just to warm ourselves up a bit. So I would like to kindly ask whoever joined us in the meanwhile, if you came here prepared with some questions, or even if you didn't, but you just thought about something that you would like to ask Gayle directly, just please raise your hand or let us know in the chat, and I can definitely invite you to address any of your questions. So if there's anybody interested, please raise hands. No, nobody. Not yet, maybe.
Not woken up yet, like me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. I'll forgive you this time, but next time I won't be as forgiving, okay?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are in that point of your life when you became a journalist, and you were working, as far as I know, for magazines such as 17 and Elle and all those cool things that we get to read as well, and probably dealing with pieces and features about what? Fashion, teenagers? What were you writing about?
Mostly, I seem to get a beat of writing about kind of young people and sort of social justice. So I did, some really fun articles about horoscopes or interpreting your dreams and things like that. But mostly at 17 in particular, they sent me all over the country and all over the world to write about kind of young people facing adversity. So, it would be my first young adult novel, which I don't know if it's published in Romania. It was called Sisters Insanity here, and it was about these young women in a behavior modification, basically a prison that they get sent to for, being defiant or gay. And this was based on a story, one of the first stories I did at 17. I went to Sierra Leone to write about the child soldiers in the Civil War there. So I did articles like this for 3 years straight, one a month. It was pretty amazing. It was, I think, the best job in journalism that there was. And people were always surprised that teenagers cared about these things. And I really understood that not only did they care because this is back in the days before Venmo or even being able to do an online donation, they would write us letters and send their allowance in the letters because they wanted to help the people in the article. And it made me realize that young people really kind of see themselves, and I think this is more true now than ever, in a community of young people, and they understand the world doesn't necessarily take their problems seriously and how exploitable they are, and they can't vote. And I found that to be the case. And so when I wrote my first young adult novel, it was like, of course, this is the age group I want to write about and I want to write for. And it's been such a long time since I started writing. I think it was in the 90s when I started doing journalism, and now it's it's 2022. So it's been the same thing where people really care about issues deeply, and they're not so self-absorbed that they only care about the issues in front of them. If you can make it resonate so they understand, even though somebody might seem so different from them, like lumberjacks in the middle of Washington State, I imagine are very different from the experience of a lot of you in Romania. But hopefully, if I've done my job right, and humans being humans, you connect, you feel a connection.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, I was just smiling because yesterday we had a talk at this festival with Namina Forna, if you know her. She's like originally from Sierra Leone.
Mm-hmm.
So I find this very interesting how you just mentioned the country. And she was talking to us a lot about issues that drove her family away, about the Civil War, and about how difficult it was for her as a teenager to be there before she moved to the United States. And I was just thinking that because no, we don't have your first book available, but we do have We Are Inevitable, as I said. And I actually coordinated a debate back in February based on your book. And one of the things that we noticed speaking with teenagers was that you really know how to represent people. I mean, in this kind of book, I find that there are a lot of characters who are very representative. I mean, we have a character who suffered an accident and now he cannot walk and he has certain issues and he would like to be fine again and he would like to be integrated again and is struggling with that. We also have addicts, and I think it's very, very brave of you to touch such a sensitive topic, which to us in Romania is not maybe as spread as it is in the States, let's say, but it's still there and it's still important. And I have the feeling that we are not talking enough about it. So I think that what you did was very brave and very inspiring for us and for younger readers. So for that, I would like to thank you. And this is my next question for you is how do you think about this kind of diversity in terms of characters? Where do you inspire yourself from? Like, do you have real stories you build up your characters on?
Well, first of all, thank you. That was a really lovely compliment that you paid me. So thank you. I appreciate that. It's interesting because there definitely has been a very strong move in the United States to make sure that voices and readers see themselves reflected in books. And so it's not just white cis characters. So, there's also a danger there of inserting diversity to fit like a quota or a trend. And that's sort of never been the way I've done it. When I started thinking about We Are Inevitable, and I started this book, I think 5 or 6 years ago, Chad was always there. He was always this character who had gotten stuck in this town for very different reasons from Aaron, and was the opposite of Aaron, where Aaron is so pessimistic and down on his life. Chad just has this natural exuberance. So the same with his brother. I knew that his brother had died of addiction just because I was less interested, although it's so important because in this country, what happened with medications and drugs and sort of how the pharmaceutical companies basically created a huge public health problem with like Oxy and the other kind of medications. I knew that you can't go to a small town in America and not see that play out. But really, I was more interested in the emotional side of it, because when someone has a mental illness or someone has an addiction, it's treated differently than like a physical illness, right? And it's very easy to see it as a choice that they're making. His brother Sandy is choosing addiction. He's choosing to do this over his family. And maybe that is true for the first time that he chose to kind of pick up whatever it was that he picked up. But addiction really, it's such a complicated mix of, predispositions and physical things. So I really was more interested in Aaron's reaction and blaming him. So it becomes natural to me because Sandy and Chad and Aaron, they're such fully formed people, and they're not defined by their addiction. They're not defined by their disability. It's part of who they are and part of a broader character. So I think that that's what keeps the characters from feeling like they're just kind of slotted in there to represent a certain thing. and be fully informed, fully embodied characters. And with, you know, I also rely on authenticity readers. So I have a friend who, she's actually the photographer who's taken my author photos for years. She's in a wheelchair. She uses a wheelchair, but it was so different for a woman than for a man. So I got in touch with a bunch of people, and I wound up speaking to this guy, Dean, who turned out to be Chad. Like, they had so many things in common in terms of like how they were after their accidents, like getting so drunk that friends had to carry them up and down stairs of bars, peeing in their you know, pants or their catheters. So it was amazing how I'd created a character that was so much like him. So that kind of helps to really make sure that you are writing about a specific character rather than like, this character represents disability. Sorry for the coughing. As I told everybody, I have COVID. So after 2 years, I finally succumbed.
Once again, we are very sorry, and we really, really hope that you're going to be better soon.
I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
Yeah, thank you for this explanation. You have to understand that, at least for me, even if I've read a lot of books, and I've translated a lot of books, and I've written about a lot of books, it's still amazing for me the way that literature and writing seems to have evolved in the latest, I don't know, let's say 20 years. So it's just amazing, because you can imagine that I started, I think I started reading a lot of time ago, but let's say I started reading fantasy and young adult back in Harry Potter time. So I'm pretty much contemporary with Harry Potter. And even if, let's say, Harry Potter was quite good at representing as well, but still, I mean, everybody who read it knows that the majority of the characters were still white. They were still on their feet. They still had a very straight sexual orientation. So everything was like very much within standards and within frameworks with them. So this is why I find very fascinating that now you guys are the, let's say, newer authors, those who are just taking by storm this kind of young adult and middle grade stage. You really, really succeed at representing so well, even if this is not your intention. So this is why I'm so happy about it.
There's definitely been a sea change in the United States. There's an organization called We Need Diverse Books, and I think they're, you know, about 10 years old. And just the other day, I went to a book event for E. Lockhart, the sequel to We Were Liars, Family of Liars, which I imagine is coming out there soon because it's such a popular book. And I brought my daughter. My youngest daughter is adopted from Ethiopia. And we went to the bookstore together. And when she was little, we had the hardest time finding picture books with anybody that looked like her. And unlike in Romania, I would assume in the United States, there's a fair amount of people that look like her. We have a, you know, decent Black population. And for years and years and years, like, those children did not see themselves in books. And then when we would look for books, they were always very serious books. And my youngest is not into anything serious. She wants something funny. And she was looking at the back wall, and it was picture books. And I'm telling you, like, nearly all of the children were not white. And she said, "What happened? This is amazing." Because she remembered we would go to bookstores. So there definitely has been a change. And one of the things I like seeing is what I call casual diversity, which is where you see a character, like in We Are Inevitable, there's a character named Jax. They are non-binary. They are identified as they. Those are the pronouns they use. And there's no story to it, right? Like Jax, and I don't want to give too much away, but there's a romance involving Jax. But just to populate your books with people that it's not their identity obviously is going to inform who they are and who their character is, but that you get to sort of see the world as it is, full of people who are, you know, using wheelchairs and not using wheelchairs, but the use of the wheelchair is not the main focus of their life. Maybe it was after they had to start using it, but just generally to kind of see people in the full breadth. I think it's wonderful to me when I'm watching something and I just sort of see a character who is so unlike a character how I would have seen them 10 years ago, and just there, as well as to kind of see stories that focus on characters. I mean, I think that's made storytelling so much more interesting these days, because you're getting access to stories you've never seen before.
Speaking of which, because you said you don't want to divulge too much of the story, I will just ask our lovely attendants, who has read We Are Inevitable? I know a couple of names. Alexandra, I'm talking to you. And Diana, thank you. Those people I know. Okay, Lavinia, wow, what a surprise. You've read the book. Okay, anyone else? No? Nobody? No? Okay, so I'll have a question for you guys. Before I'm saying that already, we have some questions for Gayle, but for you guys, if you just see the cover, like behind me, and if you bear in mind what I just talked to with Gayle, would you read the book?
Would you judge this book by the cover?
Yeah, no, let's do it. Let's do it. It deserves it. It's okay. Okay, so you see, because there's not only lovely colors on its cover, you have a girl who is hiding behind a record, and you have a guy who is with his nose in a book. And actually, some of you guys have pointed out to me that the girl is looking at the guy and not at the records. That was something that I discovered later. And this means actually a lot. And there, like, this book also has a very lovely connection between music and books, between reading and listening to music. It's maybe why we have this picture on the cover, and it's like super important. And when we discussed this book, in the debate I was mentioning, Gayle, actually one of the teams involved in the debate had to prepare a playlist for the other team. The other team had to prepare a reading list for the other team.
I made that very easy for them all. So many references.
You did. That was actually one of the things that we loved the most. The fact that we had the references, that we had the list. And I was just going to ask you, before I take the questions from the chat, what prompted you to offer us the list?
So the book is about Aaron, who used to love books. He thought books were miracles. His father is also a big reader, and he points out that you have these 26 letters and some punctuation, and that can create infinite words and infinite worlds. And to him, this is incredible, or it was. But when the book opens, he can't read anymore. And then he also really does not like music. His older brother, Sandy, was the music person, and Aaron does not like music. So for Aaron and for Hannah, the girl with her nose in the record, they kind of represent these two ideas. Like she's a musician, she's very into music. He is a he owns a bookstore, a failing bookstore. Sorry, my head is foggy from the COVID. I'm finding it a little hard to put sentences together. Anyhow, as I wrote the book, what I started to do is I realized there were so many book references in there that I started using the chapter titles as the chapter titles are all titles of books. And this turned out to be just so wonderful and easy, because it was so easy to pick a chapter title out, because there were so many books that just come up in Aaron's day-to-day thinking. And then a lot of times, most of the time, I felt that the titles themselves had their own significance just as titles. So there were so many books in there. It felt really important to, at the end, have a bibliography of all the books that were mentioned, just because I wanted to give any reader who was interested an opportunity to look up the books. And sometimes Aaron won't even mention the book's name, but I knew what it was. And so I wanted to make sure that when he's talking about his father reading a book of poetry by Mattia Harvey, that if you're interested in that, you knew what it was. So it made complete sense, because this thing is so informed by books and also eventually by, music. Tea break, and I have water and a cough drop. Let me get prepared. Hold on. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. No, for me. And I'll just leave you 1 minute so that you can take everything that is around you and helps you breathe better.
I don't think there's any Romanian authors that I mentioned. Now I feel bad. I know there's definitely a Hungarian author who gets I think chapter 2.
It's fine. I mean, if we ever get the sequel to this book, maybe bear that in mind.
Definitely. And I would like to come visit because I have not been to Romania since I was 7 years old, 1977.
There you go. So you've been here once.
Been there. It was while Ceausescu was still there, and it was right after the earthquake. So I had relatives, so we went to visit relatives.
Good. So it's a good time to come back and to see how Romania has changed in the meanwhile.
I have lots of friends who've been living in Romania, so I do need to come back.
There you go. Goody. So we do have a couple of questions. Finally, people have started to warm up a bit. So I will first take the first round of questions from the chat, and then I will let Simina ask something because she was the next in line. And then I'll take Lavinia's questions. So first of all, we have some questions from Ioana. And she says, do you have a mantra or something along those lines that helps you calm down and trust yourself during your creative process?
Okay, first of all, I want to know how you know that I need calming down, because you are 100% correct. It is amazing that you asked that question, because it's almost like you have an insight into how I write, which every time you write, it's a leap of faith, right? You have this idea in your head, these characters in your head, and you have to translate them to the page. And sometimes it happens very easily and seamlessly. If I say I wrote in 3 months, it was like almost in a trance, and I didn't have to go back and redo it. But with every other book, it's this very process of getting to know these characters. And so I think what I've learned is to give myself time. Sometimes I put entire books away and just say, this one's not ready. I started We Are Inevitable, like I said, 5 years before, and it was a very different book. It was about Aaron chasing Hannah to all of these different gigs. And then it became much more about the community of people there. So it took me a minute to kind of figure all of that out. The things I'm working on right now, I think the mantra I tell myself is, I've published 12, 15 books now, and I'm happy with all of them. And I wasn't at certain points. So that you'll get there, and you have to just give yourself the time to allow yourself to get there, and the faith. And that can be difficult because this is also my job. This is how I earn a living. But I think there's just a trust there, and follow your gut, and keep working at it. But it's interesting because I have recently learned, for the first time ever, I'm writing a book out of order. I'm writing it in the sections that I want to write. And I used to not do that because it was like, no, I must do this to do this. And I've decided to lower the stakes and have more fun with it and enjoy the process more, and realize that it's okay if I'm feeling the urge to write this chapter here. It's not cheating. And yes, I don't know what's coming before, but maybe this will help me figure that out. So that's completely brand new for me. I've never done that before in the 20 years of writing books. And one of my best friends is the author Libba Bray, and she writes completely out of order. And I told her, and she's like, welcome to our team. So that's that. And I think in terms of, if there's writers out there, eventually you have to kind of learn to trust your own voice. You are the one thing that you bring to this, because you go into a bookstore and there's so many other titles, and you're like, why? What do I have to say? These stories they're all the same story. And this is true. But nobody brings to the page and the experience what you do, because you have a very specific, unique, only to you set of life experiences and ways of looking at the world. And that is where only you can write the book that you can write. So I think it's important to remember that, and to remember to validate and honor what it is you bring to the page. And so for me, just realizing this is who I am, this is how I write, wherever I go, no matter what I write, I bring that sensibility with me. And I will get there. I will get there if I give myself the time to get there.
Yeah, I think you also at least started to answer the second question as well about discovering yourself and your writing style. Even if I have this suspicion that maybe you haven't finished discovering. Am I right or am I wrong?
I don't want to finish. I mean, I wish sometimes that I wanted to write the same kind of book over and over again, because I will tell you a secret. Commercially, that's a very good thing to do, right? People love a series. They love to go back to the author and know that they're going to get the same thing over and over again. And I understand that. I feel the same. Like there's a certain comfort in that. I'll reread a certain book over and over again. But my interests, maybe it's because I'm a Gemini, my interests are too all over the place that I can't ever focus on any one kind or even one age. So I think there's a saying that we keep growing until we die. And it's true. Like, I don't ever want to think that like I'm done developing as a writer. When I have, that means I'm done writing, because there's always more to learn. And I think maybe that's why writing has gotten harder, not easier, as I've gone along, because you realize your ambitions grow, the things you want to try, you want to stretch, you want to do something completely new. Like this book was, it's a comedy. I know that it has a lot of very serious themes, but I loved being able to write the comic interplay and the banter between Aaron and Chad and the lumberjacks. And in my regular life, you guys can't tell right now because I'm a little subdued, but I have a quick sense of humor. I'm always making jokes. And so I think when I would go on tour for like If I Stay, or I was here, people are always surprised that I'm not like this very serious person. And I wanted to have some books that showed that side of me. So it was, again, that's a way to stretch and do different things.
Yeah, I don't know about others, but I didn't really have the impression that you're a very serious person just by looking at your pictures.
Yeah, if you look at my pictures, I'm always laughing. So
yeah, exactly. Goody, thank you so much so far, Gayle. We have a couple of people who wanted also to ask something directly. So in the right order, we have Simina, Alexandra, and Daliana. Please.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Salute.
Nice to meet you, and thanks for joining in spite of your COVID. I know it's tough.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask is that I noticed that along your career, you accompanied this public category, the teenagers, and both as a journalist, you said you started in the 90s, and as a writer as well. And I was wondering if you sensed any evolution or differences in time in terms of market and maybe in the teenagers themselves. I don't know. That's my question.
That's such a good question. And, not only do I have the view of sort of seeing it from an author who writes for this market, but I have two daughters who are now teenagers. I have a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old. And in some ways, I think there are certain things that are evergreen, right? There's the feelings of how it feels, how deeply important friendships are to you at that age. I think that I'm so glad that that's something I've seen more and more in YA, because I think when I first started, there was such a focus always on a romantic relationship. But I know for myself and for lots of young people, the formative relationship at that age are your friendships, your platonic friendships. So, I think I've seen changes there. I've seen changes, as we were talking about with Iulia, about representation and whose stories are told. But I would say that the most major sea change that I've seen with young people is really, again, and to me, this is very different generationally, is how they are challenging gender stereotypes and norms, and kind of separating the biological sex at birth, whether you identify as cis or trans or non-binary, just the idea that like I was born female and therefore I have to be this way as a girl. That seems to be changing in a way that I see with my children and their friends in ways that seem completely different to me. And yet when you come down to it, the way that people feel things, the way a lot of people secretly harbor fears that they won't fit in or find their people or be loved for who they are. I think the reasons for that, the outward trappings of that might change, but it's the emotional truth of it that I think stays the same. So I think that's what allows me to continue writing in this space and having these firsthand view at teenagers. And I definitely avoid all slang now, because as soon as my children teach me a new piece of slang, it's over. So
thank you so much, Simina and Gayle. Yeah, speaking about slang, I'm not really sure what I'm talking anymore, because now when I talk to the teenagers I usually relate or work with, all the time I feel that they're going to serve me that okay boomer thingy, and all the time I feel like I have to update myself so I can
I know the okay boomer, I think they've realized that just like, you're like, but wait, I'm millennial, or we're like, we're Gen X.
Yeah.
They just know it triggers, and so they'll do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Alexandra, I think it was your turn.
Yeah. Hi, it's so nice meeting you.
Hi, Alexandra, you too.
I have so many questions for you, but first I want to tell you that I felt in love with We Are Inevitable.
Yay.
I think after the first chapter, and I usually read a lot of fantasy, but sometimes I feel like spicing it a little bit and trying something new. And this is how I stumbled upon your book. And it was such a great experience for me because it felt real. It was funny, and I empathized a lot with the male character, with his anger and resentment and suspicious attitude. He didn't want any help from anyone, and a pessimistic point of view. I found myself in him sometimes, and I think I probably made the same choices as him along the story. And I really, really enjoyed the parallel between a dying bookstore and dinosaurs. It was very, very funny and very, very sad for me because I remember when I was little and I used to go to bookstore with my mom and buy a lot of books for us, and I try to go back to that time and stay away from purchasing any books online and just go and buy maybe one or two books and read them and go back for more. I am curious, where do you get your information or ideas for your books?
Well, first of all, thank you for all of that. I love the idea that for you, exotic is a contemporary realistic. So although I think there was something about this book that for me writing it and hopefully reading it does feel a little escapist, because I wrote this book, I started it before, as I mentioned, but one of the last kind of normal things I did was I met with my editor to go over notes, and then we went into lockdown. And I was in New York City where it hit first, and it was crazy. And I was writing this book during the lockdown. So to me, it was escapism. It was almost like going to this fantasy world of these hilarious people and everybody in a bookstore. You couldn't even go into a bookstore. So I appreciate that it felt like something new and different from you. And in terms of sort of where I get my ideas with this book in particular, I think it was very lucky because I was in kind of a dark space even before the lockdown. And I wouldn't even say I was in such a dark space before, but when I started writing this, I just really felt the need to be among these people who were faced with the destruction of the way that they lived their life and made a conscious choice, even though with Aaron, it took him a little bit, not to wallow in it, not to wallow in the bitterness and anger and resentment and blame others, but to come together in a community, because I think that is basically the cure for so much is finding your people and coming together and building something new. So really that was sort of the inspiration. And in terms of everything else, you start with that emotional center of it. And then I have to like make sure that I'm getting everything right. So, you know, I have a lot of bookseller friends, and I sent one of my friends an early draft, and she was like, you know, this bookstore is so badly run. Most bookstores I know are really well run, you know, and it's men. And she was kind of a little upset about that. So I played more into the fact, I had to add the fact that when before it was a better run bookstore, and I made it more of a used bookstore as well, because it kind of fit into the whole sort of just chaotic nature of it. You know, the construction stuff, I don't really know anything about that, but I have a friend who does, and he's from Montana. So he was really good with me about like helping to make sure that like the lumberjacks, when they're talking about the ramp or, you know, what's wrong with the wood, he'll help me with that. So I already knew the characters, but then I do research. It's the journalist in me who does the research to make sure that, you know, the small details are correct. And then with addiction, I definitely worked with addiction specialists too, because I wanted to make sure that it felt real, but also, and I had to put this in the author's note at the end, I wanted people to read this to understand that how Aaron feels about Sandy. He blames him. He's so angry at him. He's so shut down. He can't see the nice things Sandy tried to do for him before he died, because he's angry and he has guilt and he has all these different things. And so I that is all very true. Addiction is so complicated. It's so complicated because it impacts the rest of the family too. But I wanted to kind of make sure that readers understood, don't internalize that message that this is your fault. Understand that you have characters saying things sometimes that you don't believe, but they have to sort of, Aaron's going on a journey of transformation. And so where he is in the beginning, where he is at the end is different. So, and then I had to do a lot of research on dinosaurs and what happened, and that it really did take like 33,000 years. And the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, which is the first book that's mentioned, it's the first chapter title. I love that book. It's, if anybody has any interest, it's so well written. It just like reads like you wouldn't believe. And so I got so many great nuggets from going back to a lot of those books. And I see that there's a question here, and I'm going to jump ahead and answer part of it. I'll have to think about the top three because that's tricky. But I didn't read all of the books that were there. Some of them I'd read, and some of them I just kind of knew to put in there. And some of them I knew what they were, but I didn't need to read them, like the rules, because that was such a huge book. But a lot of them, the book got deeper when I went and reread the book and kind of found things like the Giving Tree. I mean, the Giving Tree was such a big thing. And then book Stone Soup. Is Stone Soup a popular book in Romania, a children's book?
We actually have a version of the story, so we are familiar with it.
Yeah, it's a folk story.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I didn't realize it until a friend of mine pointed out. He's like, "Oh, you essentially rewrote Stone Soup," and it's kind of true, right? It's like it starts out with with a lie, and all these people throw these things in, and then the community builds this together, brings them together. So
pretty much.
I have another one.
Yes, please.
Do you hear from your readers much? What kind of things do they say to you?
I don't hear from them as much as I used to, because I feel like now so much of the interaction happens on social media, where I spend less time, because when I'm on there so much, just my time just gets sucked away. But I used to hear from them a lot via direct email. So I still get emails from readers, and I still, will hear from people on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. It's a little harder to kind of catch up. But, I hear different things from different readers. I have always had adult readers who say, "Oh, I'm too old to read your book." And I think that's sort of silly. But I love, more than anything, hearing from readers who tell me or write to me what you just said, about discovering a book by accident, and then kind of, or going to it because it was something a little different for you. And really, I love when that happens, when you pick up a book and you don't know what to expect, and it's like a warm bath. You don't want to get out. It's the best. So that is my favorite. So anytime somebody tells me that, it's amazing. I really miss traveling. I really miss being able to see readers face to face. This is my traveling is my favorite thing to do. So to be able to kind of go on book tour and go to places and meet readers from all over the world and discover, that a story that I wrote about this little bookstore mountain town resonated with somebody in Romania or Brazil or India. To me, that's very reassuring and makes the world feel much smaller in a good way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Gayle. I think we also have Daliana waiting here.
Hi.
Hi, Diana.
I want to say that I love your books, and I'm so happy that I can speak with you right now.
Me too.
And If I Say is one of my favorite books of all the time, and
Yay.
I don't cry at books, but this book made me cry so hard, and it was so emotional. I just can't hate this book. Is so good, and I love all of your books, what I read. And my question is that if your character is based on a real person.
And If I Stay?
In
Or-
all of your books.
If I Stay is based on real people. And I cried the entire time that I was writing it. So Mia is fictional and Adam is fictional. But the mom and the dad and Teddy are based on really good friends of ours who died in a car accident. There was a family of 4. And by the time we heard the news, they were all dead. But I learned after the fact that the 8-year-old boy on whom Teddy is based, he had lived longer than the rest of his family, and he had been flown on a medical chopper to a different hospital, and he died. And for years, and this was my godson, I was so close to these children. They were the first of our friends to have kids. So that was the part that haunted me, where I wondered if that little boy knew that his family was gone and if he had chosen to go with them. And when this happened, I was a journalist. I wasn't writing a novel. I never had any plan to write about them or this story. But then it was about 7 years later, I woke up one morning and there was this girl with dark hair and dark eyes, and she played the cello. And I knew nothing about the cello. But I knew she was going to answer that question of what would happen if your family was gone and you were in this in-between place and you had to choose. And so I sat down and I started to write. And it was like the most beautiful experience because I brought my friends back to life. The mom and the dad and Teddy, they were really those people. So that's why I was crying a lot. As I was writing, I think it's why people cry a lot as they read it. They can really kind of feel that emotion. So that's the most direct answer of like people who I knew very well showing up in a book. Other books, it's more, there's always a mixture of me and the characters and other people I know. I always joke to people that authors are liars and thieves. We're going to steal anything we can from you. Like I might steal your bookshelf that you have there. I might steal, how you look right now and put it in a book. You never know. But it's hard for me sometimes to even like realize who is who. But I'm not usually, mostly these days, it's just bits of me that are in the main character. But with If I Stay, it was specifically this other people. Sorry.
That's so beautiful. And one more question. I want to ask you what you do in your free time when you don't write.
What do I do in my free time when I don't write? Oh my gosh, so much. Well, I spend time with my friends. I have so many friends who I love to kind of spend time with. And it's been nice to be able to go back into the world and do that. So I like to do that. I have daughters and my niece lives here, so I do a lot of cooking. I have a puppy now, so I spend a lot of time in the park with my puppy. I listen to music, I bake, I garden, I travel. So many different things. I could just go on and on. Also, I am going to tell you, I don't know if you love If I Stay, I don't know if you've read the sequel, Where She Went. Have you read the sequel? Okay. Have you read We Are Inevitable, the new one? You have? It's okay if you haven't, because did you catch there's a little Easter egg treat about Adam and Mia in it? You saw that? Okay. For all of you who haven't read it, there's a little nugget about Adam and Mia in We Are Inevitable.
Now I have to read the other one as well. Because you made me curious. So I have read We Are Inevitable, but I didn't read the other one. So yeah, okay, I will do my homework, promise. Daliana, do you have any more questions for Gayle? No? Okay.
Thank you. No, I don't have.
Thanks, Daliana.
Thank you. Lavinia, I can see that you have your hand up.
Yes, hi. First of all, thank you I'm so glad to be here, and I really loved your book. And now I have to read If I Stay and the second one to see the link between them. And my curiosity is if you would like to see We Are Inevitable as a movie, and if you have plans on this, maybe you can tell us something.
Right now, nothing with We Are Inevitable. There's other projects are in various phases. I would love to see We Are Inevitable as a TV series, just because I would love to spend more time with those guys. I just think that it would be like, my friends, like it's like Gilmore Girls, but with guys. So I think it would be fun to kind of see what happens with all of them moving forward. But it can take a while for it all to be, Netflix gobbled up a lot of stuff. And now in the US, Netflix is like having some problems. So other things, which hopefully I'll be able to share soon, are in development. But this one, not yet. But it takes a while. I have faith.
Okay.
I think it'd be fun. It would be fun. Even as I was writing it, I could, because I've been writing more scripts. So I could just, when I was writing that dialogue, I could so hear it. I could so see it play out on a screen. Also, I love your glasses.
Oh, thank you. And the other one was about the 3 favorite books. If you can share with us.
That is such a tough question.
You can tell us 5. It's okay.
5 favorite. I see, as a reader, I'm the worst, because like when I was younger, like I read everything Kurt Vonnegut had ever written, right? But now I have no desire to read Kurt Vonnegut. So like there's authors that I will always read no matter what. So Jacqueline Woodson, no matter what she writes, I will read. Anne Patchett is another one who I will read everything. One of my favorite books of all time when I was younger, and I still love, is Jane Eyre. So I still absolutely love Jane Eyre. I wouldn't say it's my favorite book of all time, but it's just a book I love. There was a book that was huge in the US in the 90s called The Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing. And it's one of those books, it's like interlinked short stories. And it's one of those books, it's like my comfort book that I go back to. I used to read the Melina Marchetta books. I don't know if she's known there. She's an Australian author.
Yes.
Jellicoe Road.
Yeah,
I've reread
Jellicoe Road is one of my favorite books ever.
Jellicoe Road, The Piper's Son, and Saving Francesca. I think I've reread those books so many times. So good. So like it's a special book where, and again, it comes back to, I want to be with these characters again. Like it's more like I want to spend time in this world. So those are some of the books that I return to. And then there's books that I've read that I just read and they blow my mind, and I don't ever need to read them again. But like, I remember when I read The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, I was just so completely like, wow. But I've never wanted to reread that one. So it's hard to say. Do you have top 3, Lavinia?
I would have, but I read the fantasy, and I always recommend series, and I feel bad for this because I kind of cheat, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, if a series is it, so what you gonna do?
Yeah.
Raise of hand. How many people here read fantasy predominantly? Yeah. It's so funny. I feel like it goes in waves, but I understand now that it's just like why fantasy is so appealing. It's just like, I don't want to be in this world right now. I don't want to read anything that has to do with I'm already starting to see some books that are set in the lockdown. And I'm like, no, I don't want to read about this. I don't want to spend any more time in this world than I have to.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I was really curious because you just mentioned it. So I'm going to jump right in because I've read a book. I actually translated a book and I remember talking to the author last year, and the book was happening during the pandemic and she wrote the book while in lockdown. Yet there was no mention in the book about the pandemic, even if the book was contemporary and it had some touches of gothic and horror and stuff. So for me, that's a bit weird. So to place a book during the pandemic while realistically being in a place on earth during the pandemic and to ignore the pandemic, if you know what I mean.
No, for sure. I get it. You can't ignore it. I'm writing a book now that's contemporary and it's sort of set like, I'm writing it now, but it's probably set like in a year from now. And the pandemic, it absolutely it's changed the way we lived our lives, and you can't write about it. It's had huge impacts on families, on development, on everything, for sure. So it's interesting to see how people will weave it into. I think you can't ignore it. That said, I don't want to read a story that's like a love story set during the lockdown. I say that until somebody does it in a way that makes it interesting. But I brought that up because that's where I think fantasy can be so interesting, because in fantasy, you can explore the feelings and what it felt like to be living this way, but in a different way. And that I'm interested in. Like, I'm interested in exploring and processing how it felt to have your world change overnight. But I don't necessarily want to be reading about, the sirens and the in New York, the 7 o'clock clapping where we all came out and clapped at 7, even though I loved that about it. I don't want to read about that. It just happened. It just happened.
Yeah, that makes sense when you put it like that. I mean, it's one thing to definitely pretend that it's not there or it hasn't been there. And it's one thing not to be willing to look for it everywhere. Guys, I just wanted to tell you that we have officially, maybe let's be generous and say 5 more minutes with Gayle over here. So this might be your last chance in a while to ask questions if you have them now. So do it. Joanna, I can see you raised a hand.
Right, I'm popping a cough drop. Here we go.
Hi. I have 2 quick questions. First, what breed is your dog? I can see him in the background.
Come here, buddy. Come here. This is Rudy, and he is a half Schnauzer, half Poodle. He's called a Schnoodle, and he is just the most loving dog in the world. And as I said, I've been sick with COVID. He has not left my side. And usually in the morning, we take him to the Prospect Park and he runs around. They have off-leash hours and he loves to go berserk with other dogs. And my husband tried to get him up, but he would not leave my side. He missed off-leash hours to protect me. Thank you for asking this very important question. I'm obsessed with him.
It's adorable.
Thank you. Do you hear that, buddy? He's so sweet. He's the biggest goofball.
And I'm sorry, but I had to ask, in the If I Stay movie edition of the book, you did interviews with the cast and you asked Jamie Blackley if he read Where She Went during filming. He didn't, but do you know if he read it since then? And if he hadn't, what do you think he would feel about it?
I don't know if he read it. I remember when they cast him, I said, oh, you'll be so good if they do the sequel, because he's so soulful. So I don't think he's not a big reader. So I think he hadn't read it. He also said he didn't want to pollute. So his idea of who Adam was, and if I stay with who Adam was and where she went, which I understand. So I'm not sure. And that movie was on the verge of getting made and then it didn't. So I know it's very tragic. So I'm not sure. I haven't seen Jamie in a while. We used to see each other whenever I went to London. but I can ask him. I think he's doing lots of TV over there. He's such a nice guy.
Yeah, sure. Let me know. You can call me up, tell me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ioana. And we also have Diana waiting.
Now can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hi.
Great. Hi. I know you mentioned it a few minutes ago, but one of the parts that I love the most in We Are Inevitable, besides the cultural references, was the relationship between Aaron and Sandy. And I was curious, how difficult was it to write it? Because it's very complex and a little bit sensitive, even.
Thank you for bringing that up. I feel like people don't ask about the sibling relationship very much. I think I don't have specific experience with a sibling relationship in the particular dynamic that Aaron does, but I think as a parent, I have two daughters, and watching the complicated love-hate relationship between those two has really started to inform my work. So my last YA book, I Have Lost My Way, the characters of Freya and Sabrina are basically like my two children, like literally, like they're half Ethiopian, half white. I have one Ethiopian daughter, one white daughter. They love each other, but there's all this misunderstanding that happens, I think, with siblings. So I started to explore it there. And then, I continued to do it with these two. And I think it's such a family, so strange. I mean, a lot of you have siblings, you know how it is. You're thrown into this world where you spend all this time with these people who maybe in the real world, like you would never choose to be friends with. You're so different. You have different personality types. And yet, like, you're a family. You have each other's back. You're supposed to be there in a certain way. They're really hard relationships to manage. And I think we think, oh, we're family, it's okay. And it just means it's family. We have to work even harder. So to me, that's just been like really fun and interesting to explore, because it's this tight unit. And yet out in the world, like, you get to choose your friends, but you don't get to choose your relatives. So I really, to kind of explore a brother who maybe did not treat his brother that well. I mean, Sandy was not the nicest of brothers to Aaron, even before he got sick, and how that would have created like this, Aaron looked up to him, but then also was scared of him and a little resentful. And then what happens when something else comes into it, and what Aaron carries with him, that guilt and that load, because it is family. So it was really, really interesting to play with that. And increasingly, there is a picture on the cover that leads you to believe that the romance of this book is the primary story. And I would say it's not, or I would say the primary romance in this book to me is Aaron and Chad. So it's very interesting to be able to explore dynamics of multiple relationships, whether it's the romantic relationship, the platonic relationship, the father-son relationship, and the people you choose, and the people who choose you, and the people you're just born into a family with or adopted into a family with.
Thank you very much. And I have another question. Since in We Are Inevitable, we are kind of talking about how bookstores are slowly dying. What would you do if in the entire world there was only one bookstore left?
There was, oh my God, I would support it with all the money, and let's hope that it's not just Amazon. And I will say that Aaron uses that excuse of like, oh, it's nobody goes to bookstores anymore. And there definitely have bookstores that a lot of bookstores went under, when Amazon became a thing, or when people started buying digital books. But the ones that survived really thrived. And what was really amazing to see was during the pandemic, at least in the United States, these independent bookstores, they put out a call for help, and people bought so many books from them. People bought, I talked to booksellers who said people bought a $500 gift certificate and never picked it up, because I think people really realized that these are more than places to buy books. places to come together and meet friends and have a sense of community. And people miss that when it was not available. So it was very great for me when the book came out a year ago to talk to booksellers. I went last summer on this little tour of bookstores, and so many of them were doing better than they ever thought they would have done. And their community of readers had really shown up for them. To me, that shows me that we will never get down to one bookstore. There will always be more than one, because I think we realize they're more than just places to get books. You can get books from any different place, but we still, okay, Rudy, yeah. We still need our bookstores. He's getting up to no good at this point. Yeah.
I think it's getting maybe a bit impatient. Diana, is that everything you wanted to ask?
Yes. Thank you very much, Gayle, for answering.
And thank you, Diana, for asking. So at this moment, we're a bit over the time that we have been granted. And I'm very grateful to the organizers that they allowed us this tiny slip. And I really want to make something like very, I don't know, memorable, how do I say, speech of, I don't know, ending this up. But the thing is that I don't want to end it. So probably I won't just say.
So let's say to be continued next time in Romania. Okay.
I think that's a very nice promise to bear in mind, Gayle, and maybe to keep if there will be the possibility for you to do this. I'm sure there will be a lot more of us waiting for you and waiting to meet you. Me, for sure, I'm going to be the first in line. And if you bring the schnoodle, I'm sure there will be even more.
Oh my God, I feel like the schnoodle will have his own signing line.
Exactly.
The sweetest thing in the world. So
exactly, there you go. So once again, thank you in the name of all of us present here for the lovely company, and we are so looking forward to meet you in person as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being such a wonderful host.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Kisses to everybody, and be
safe and be well.